Go ahead and start. We've got a number of people. I'm Marie Aquilino. Some of you saw me this morning on the first one. And I really, it's really a pleasure because Alberta took a big chance and said that I could talk about anything I wanted. And that we could do it, and we could really make it fun and interesting. And this is supposed to be interactive, so you will be doing some of the work. But I think it's actually really important to have these sessions where you're just not, it's not more stuff in there. So I want to know, and I'll tell you what happened to me. A number of years ago, I was at a cocktail party, and I really wanted to meet this 22-year-old woman from the International Aid Agency. And I saw her, and hey, and she's running out the door, putting on a coat, running out the door. And I said, no, wait, I really need to talk to you. And she said, I can't, there's an emergency. I've got to go, I've got to catch a plane to South Africa, right? And she's got this big, heavy jacket on because it's freezing cold enough. And she said, well, yeah, our housing project has kind of created a little mini civil war. Why? What are you going to say? And so, as it turns out, yeah, they did. They had a, and how does this happen? It's like, really? A mini civil? There was a flood. They needed houses. So they gave people houses. Right? Except, houses were really big. Really big means expensive to maintain. Too expensive for the communities to maintain. Sell those houses, right? But who do you sell them to? Well, you sell them to a neighboring tribe. But that tribe has hostilities with your other neighbors. So now you have a housing program that has ignited a mini civil war, and there are real tensions and real violence as a result. How does this happen? How does something like this happen? And it happens more frequently than you would think. And it's not that it's not that they didn't think about it, right? But they had one solution in mind. Right? Houses. That's the obvious solution. It's in our DNA to think about solutions. It literally is. We're hardwired for solutions. And as we become adults, we're even worse at it. We're just like, we go straight there because we base our sense of what's happening on the past. And we take a lot of comfort from that. So solutions are they're in our nature, let's say. But what happens if the solution isn't the answer? So how many of you have had situations, I'm sure you have, you don't even have to identify yourselves if you don't want. But what happens if the solution is not the answer? What if you're not working on the right problem? We've talked, today we heard a lot of people saying, well, what's the problem, right? And what if you're throwing solutions at a problem that doesn't exist? All of these things happen, and you've probably been in some circumstance, either willingly or knowingly or not, where that's been the case. And you might be thinking, yeah, but for heaven's sakes, there's no time to build peace. We need houses. Right? Except for the fact that building inroads toward peace within the housing program would have positioned it for success. So instead, we've got an international incident. And we do know how to design for peace. Now, it might be a little counterintuitive, but putting the problem first is an insight that belongs to Einstein. And his idea was, hey, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and then 5 minutes on the solution. That means 95% of the time goes into discovering and designing the problem, in which case the solution kind of presents itself, hopefully. Now, what we do know about this attitude toward problem design is that there are huge benefits, kind of monumental. If you have a relevant, efficient, and effective problem that's based on insight and exploration and intuition, you end up building trust in your team and among your stakeholders. you end up with more effective communication. You end up drawing in the right partners. Securing serious funding because people think you're going to stay on mission and you're not going to be wandering around doing other stuff. And you end up capable of articulating the characteristics of impact. This is different than just talking about impact, right? What are the characteristics of impact? So in my argument, as the president and the founder of what I'm calling problem wisdom, which is problem design thinking, is that a good problem is a great ally. So why don't we do it? Well, it's actually a big deal that we're a culture of solutions. Solutions are comforting, they're encouraging. It worked that way the last time, right? So we really, really, really want this solution. And we all can think of them. I could name a few that had really struck me over the years. They find themselves on the cover of Time magazine, and then we never hear of it again. The life straw, right? You can drink through this straw in a puddle of mud, except if you're a child, in which case your lungs actually don't have that capacity. The Haiti house. Clinton was going to invest hundreds of millions to put up factories in Haiti where we can build our own houses, except for the fact that, gee golly whiz, nobody tested this material in a tropical climate, which loses 60% of its structural integrity in 10 days. They're looking for solutions, you know, and they're good ones, except for they're not. But there's more to the problem of solutions that I want you to be thinking about before we get into the activity that we're going to be doing. And that is that they can really cripple your progress. They can distract you from your objectives. And in the design world, you can be very attached to adding things. We're very additive in design. Right? This is not working. Like, add some other stuff over here. You know? So we have this kind of additive mentality. They can balloon your team, so it costs a lot more money. And then there's the more factor of solutions. More decisions, more opinions, more options, more experts. And there's this kind of wobbly feeling that we must be all on the same page, even though we're not. The final thing I want to say about solutions before moving forward is that there's another insidious aspect to this. That the willingness and the consistency and the commitment to which we work together, collaborate, those qualities, they're strangely not linked to solutions. They're not generated by solutions. Solutions generate energy and intensity, but they also generate division. Because you start to harden around your perspective, around the edges. Makes it difficult to collaborate effectively. There's a particular horizon that everybody's got, but it's not the same path. So they don't help us create a shared path of common ground. They don't help us work together effectively if we're just, all we're heading towards is the solution from the get-go. We kind of skip these steps. And I think this is why it's so hard to collaborate. As much as we might want to, and as much as we talk about collaboration, it's really, really hard to do. And then I was really excited. I was really heartened because I read this piece by the World Bank. And they were talking about the fact that we need better problems. And Rockefeller was talking about the problem, the idea, we need better problems. And then I kept reading, right? And I'm like, oh, this is good, this is good. I feel better now, I'm on the right track. And then the World Bank said this: all we need to do is get have our eye on that solution over there and back out, like look in the rearview mirror and hit the right problem. So we're going to back up from the solution and try to get ourselves. We're going to wind around in this kind of treacherous route, in this rather fortuitous axis, and we're going to hit it. No, we're not. Most likely we're not. So what's the option, and what am I going to argue for today, and what am I going to have you do? The option, in my opinion, is the beginning.
not the end. It's where we find the problem. So what I'd like to do is think about a little project with you that will help articulate the benefit of a good beginning. So take out some paper, or you can write it on your laptops if you want. And what I want you to do is choose an activity. We're going to do this a couple of times in different ways. Choose an activity that you know and love, not something you hate, right? Something that you know and love. So you know enough about it, so you've thought about it. You know, you've gotten into it, and you've discovered things that nobody told you about it, and you feel very comfortable with the knowledge that you have. And it can be a sport, it could be an artistic practice, it could be music, it could be an avid hobby, but not work-related yet. Now what I want you to do is list in detail all the first steps that go into this, making this beginning successful. All of them, in order. Okay? So list everything that goes into a great beginning. This is not a top 10 list. This is not a top 3 list, right? I want you to write down what you have to do in order to move forward from here. The degrees of importance, the duration, the relationships, the tension, the timing, what you can't skip, okay? And I'll give you an example. When I was a little bit younger, not that much though, I became very interested in Olympic weightlifting. And what you discover very quickly about Olympic weightlifting, especially if you're my age, is that it's dangerous, right? You know, you're throwing this bar over your head and it's really heavy, and you really don't want to end up hurting yourself, and you really don't want to have to exert yourself either. There are 24 moves in the first 15 seconds that protect me, that make the bar weightless, that keep me safe, and that make it possible for me to execute the movement pretty flawlessly. But I can't mess up any one of those moves or change the order that they're in. Okay. This is what I want you to do. So I want you to take 10 minutes or something, or 5 minutes. Let's take 5 minutes, and make your first beginner's list. And make sure, and then we're going to work on it from there. So, chop, chop, everybody to work. We're not supposed to be sitting around just listening to me talk. I talked it up already. Any questions?
It has to be in order.
I'm sorry? It's a beginner's list. So if it's not in order, then, and you give it to me, right, then I'm going to have problems executing on your, and it can be anything. Eggs Benedict, you know, if you are really, really good at that, right? It can be anything you want, but something that you know and love, because it makes a difference when you have already invested in, you know, you're thinking through these things on your own to some degree, right? We all know those experiences where people give you the information, and then 6 months later you discover, wow, if I had only been doing it this way for all these months, it would have been much better. Than they didn't say that. Nobody said that. So, yeah, in order. Okay. So everybody writes for a few minutes on your beginners list, your beginner's list. And let me know as you get finished. Be aware of things like, do I need help at a certain point? For how long? How many people? do I have to plan for something to happen first before this can work out? Think about where you've decided to start. Because if you don't know where the beginning is, that's already gone. So each one of you is deciding somewhere. That beginning is being articulated, right? Okay, this is where I'm opening the refrigerator. Or I'm putting I'm rolling the bar up against my shins before I lower my body. Because if I don't, there's going to be this much space between me and the bar. And when it goes up, it's going to go over there. So it's this kind of thing. You're aware of what you've decided already is the beginning. How are we doing? Finished? Now, before you share the answers, I want you to do this a second time, but for a professional problem. It can be one that you've taken on before, you're familiar with it, comes up in your profession. It could be one that you know is coming down the road. Do the same exercise. I'll give you an example of one that we had. Working in Haiti for a number of years on a particular site. There's a limited budget. They want to build a wall, which would have used the entire budget. So their beginning was security. And you can't ignore it. Right? You can't say, well, your beginning shouldn't be security. It should be something else. It should be dormitories. Their beginning was security. But so you don't want them to blow their budget. What do? Well, this is a site with a chapel on the hill. And in a village across the street, we build a wall. We've already alienated the villagers who are living across the street. We've already determined what our relationship is going to be. So the argument was, what is a great beginning for security in this context? Move the chapel down to the road. So now the chapel on the road, with a little soccer field, invites the community from across the street to be able to enter into that, to enter into that space and they're already part of the community. So I've changed the dynamics of where I began. I still began with the problem that they have, security, but I just changed the nature of what that beginning was going to look like for them. So if you have a professional problem that you're struggling with, or that you're really familiar with and you think, well, I've got this down, list it out, and then we're going to talk about what you've come out with. And then I'm going to just tell you in detail why this is such a valuable exercise. It might seem like, oh, yeah, I don't know, we're writing about Eggs Benedict. Right? But what's actually going to come out of what these kind of problem templates look like is a lot more information than you can imagine. And just let me know when you're ready. How are we doing? Almost ready to start? Okay. Okay. Now I want to hear from you. First, let's talk a little bit about what you know well. What kind of beginnings? Somebody give me an example. What you worked on? What's your beginning?
The first
The first
exercise,
one,
I
yeah.
picked ballet, because I know that very well.
Okay.
So the first beginning was finding a good teacher that has qualifications.
Okay.
And from there, moving into...
Are there steps to that?
No, I did not go into detail beyond
Okay.
that.
Okay. So that's somewhere where you might say, okay, in order to find a good ballet teacher, you need to do the following things. Okay.
And then I moved into finding comfortable clothes that you wear. 2 weeks less.
Get your teacher, comfortable clothes. Do those seem like they're in any particular order? Can I get my clothes and then get the teacher?
Yep.
Okay. So already. All right, keep going.
Study more than 4 times a week to improve.
Okay.
Ideally with the same teacher. Number 4, learn exercises to strengthen your core. Ask your teacher.
And so in your case, any single one of those can be the beginning, right? So let's say, I want to learn ballet.
Yeah.
I've been sitting behind a computer for 10 years. So I'm going to spend a year, or I'm going to spend X, Y, and Z and go through these steps to prepare. Because if I get a teacher now, I'm paying that teacher all that money for no reason whatsoever because I'm not fair. Right? So you can take any one of your steps and decide that's the beginning and make an argument for what steps are required.
It makes me think that maybe the beginning should have been to have the person explain why they want to do it.
And maybe that is the reason.
Confirming the motivation.
Confirming why you're doing it in the first place, what you're investing in, what you why ballet and not piano. I was one piano too. So, I mean, I know this sounds maybe, you're expecting someone. Just hang in with me. Okay, somebody else in their
I could play saxophone.
okay, play saxophone.
Yeah. So have an instrument first.
Okay, have to buy the saxophone.
Buy or take some. So the second, take classes with a professional like a musician. Third, start to play the first notes. After, can play the musical scale without difficulty, like so.
Okay, let me ask you this. You want to play the saxophone.
Yeah.
You have trouble with let's say you have carpal tunnel. I want to play the saxophone. I don't care. But I want to play. Are there, what goes into that first decision? I want to play the saxophone, and I'm going to find somebody to teach me, which is the same thing you need to do or something. But are there any limits? Is there any part of that problem that just doesn't get that relationship to be so easy? I bought the saxophone, and now it's sitting next to the bed because I'm afraid of the saxophone. Or, I don't know what to do. How do I find this teacher? Who do I? So we're working with pretty broad general parameters, right? We're working with top 3, top 10 lists rather than the beginning. Right? Where do you want me to start? Do I need to buy a saxophone? No, I'm going to rent a saxophone because my mother's not going to pay for the saxophone because I'm not going to play it for more than a month. So, that kind of thing. Put yourself into these situations really, really, really well. But don't generalize them. Back in is like, okay, well, no, the saxophone. And I know that, and you could even talk about those first notes on the saxophone. Those first notes that I wanted to get a sound out of. Here's how you do that. Here's how you get that sound. Other examples. Who wants to talk a little bit about what you wrote about? Yeah.
I have yoga. So I guess my starting is different depending. I have like either I'm signing up for a class or I'm just setting aside time to practice on my own. Either way, after like I have to change my clothes, like get dressed appropriately, have some water, have a mat. I'm driving to class and I'm driving. If not, then I'm just starting from home. Go through calming breathing exercises, grounding and centering.
Who's not you? You already know yoga? Yeah. So you
Yeah.
already. Okay. So grounding and centering.
Yeah.
What is it?
Kind of part of like breathing and like.
Okay. So
sitting
so even
still,
that, all
standing,
this stuff. If you were
balance.
going to tell me, I'm going to show the beginning for grounding and centering in this yoga movement. That's what you would have. You would have to take me through every
Single
bit of that. Right? Breathing's not an easy thing. We do it all the time. But it's really hard. Especially when people tell you, breathe like this. breathe into your belly. What? And so you know what that breath feels like. You know how you're taking that breath in. It matters, right? Because it matters is whether or not you can use your body and get a certain form out of it. The breath matters a lot. In Olympic weightlifting, if you breathe at the wrong moment, you don't have control over the bar anymore. Right? So if I put breathe at the top, and breathe was really number 7, and out of that 24 movements, I found it out of order. The idea is thinking about what makes you efficient, what makes you effective. Where does the strength have to go? Right? Are you moving? Is your list about strength and control and slowness, or is it about speed and efficiency? These are topics that really matter to us in humanitarian aid, and we make these decisions all the time. Okay, another example. Yes, you go.
Mine was hockey. I'm a really big hockey fan. I don't actually know where, like, for me, when I was thinking, like, where do you start? It's like being a fan. Like, I think there's different motivations for being a fan. So I think it just starts from, like, what do you want to get from being a fan? Like, do you want community, to build friends, to watch it with? Do you want to just, like, really learn about, like, the sport and tactics? Or do you want to just, have a pastime or a hobby? For me, it was kind of like all of them, but I kind of started with like the lowest barrier, just like looking at videos on YouTube, seeing what you like. Whether it's like watching videos of goals or like, hearing interviews of players, knowing about the players, or
So it's knowledge.
yes, it's knowledge.
So you're talking about knowledge acquisition.
Yes, and then I also said watching games, but also that breaks it down to like, how do you watch games? Like, how do you get the
Do
channels?
you watch it alone? Do you
Yes.
watch it
Do
with
you watch
friends?
it alone? Do you watch it with friends? How do you actually get to a game? Like, where do you buy the tickets? Like, where do you get the cheapest tickets? Like, which tickets do you get? Where's the arena? Like, what arena is good? Where do you sit? Like, where should you sit if you want to see this or that?
But these things would all be, if you were designing this as a beginning, you'd be making choices about all of those things.
Yes.
Right? All of those things would be very precise. Let's do one more, and then we're going to look to the professionals.
I did painting watercolor.
Okay.
First thing is I told them to pick an easy image, like 3 or something, and use that as you go. Second thing you need is pick watercolor paper and paint.
So I have to get supplies. So the first thing I have to do is I have to have supplies. I have to be able to have gone out and gotten fixed watercolor paper.
Well, depending on what image you just picked, the thick watercolor paper is too small. Okay. But since you're picking an easy image, you just need small watercolor.
Right, but I need it.
Yes.
Okay. So I have had to go out and get that. Okay. So this idea of like, where is planning? What has to be done in advance? If you look down your list, and 5 steps later, it's like, oh man, I need help over here. Or this has to be done with somebody else. Or this is where I need a teacher, but I don't need a teacher in this one. I don't need help with this one. It starts to structure all the relationships. Right? We're looking at structuring these relationships. Continue that.
trace important lines, like outer parts, and then trace the back of the paper.
Okay. I mean, I think, do you feel like you're really good at beginnings in general? Do we spend enough time? So let's look at the professional stuff. Who hasn't spoken, talk about. Did anybody work on a professional problem in addition to this one? Because what happens with professional, one of the things I want you to think about is that we change our language. Because it's often somebody else's words that we use to define what's happening. It's often somebody else's agenda that we define how. The nature of that beginning is not necessarily coming from our own experience. We inherit problems, they fall on our head, they appear out of nowhere, we're not all that happy to have them, or if we've had them many, many times, we haven't really questioned the nature of how these things are processed through a structured relationship. So why do I think this is so important? Is there anybody else who wanted to share the work that they did earlier? Okay. Because when you begin to think about, good beginnings can save lives, first of all. A friend of mine did this exercise for me, and she wrote about how to get out of a kayak if you're rolling it. Right? And it was absolutely every single thing you need to do in detail, in order, with the nature of the time it needs to take you, right? And the expectations of what might happen if you don't do these things in that order. So this is basically, if you do it really well, and if you practice working on this kind of template, it's a really great preliminary assessment of the key factors of problem design. 1, what words do you use? Are they your words? Are they someone else's words? Are there big gaps in the words that you use or in the communities that you work with? Right? We're often, we come to describing what we're working on, and a community member might not use those words at all. We talked about a lot that today, And those words would never even come up. 2, your perspective, your vantage point. Right? What are you taking on? What do you want to achieve? Do I want, I just want the saxophone because I've always wanted one? Or, I want the saxophone and I want to play the saxophone. And within the next 3 months, I want to be able to learn some of the basic fingering techniques. What is your objective? Right? But it's more than that. Vantage point is what you also won't let go of, what you can't give up. A good beginning, there's nothing, and this is non-negotiable. But vantage point is sort of where you're positioned. Do you feel like you're far out and above? I felt like most of you are sort of far out and above, right? Not too close in, not really looking at the problem really from just right here. But I'm over here. If I'm going to do watercolor, I need these things. But you could also describe okay, if I'm going to, the first time that I'm going to apply, a watercolor brush to that paper, what's going to happen? And so suddenly I know something about how hard to push, how runny it's going to be. So where are you positioned? These templates, sort of beginning templates, tell you where you're positioned in relationship to the problem. Is this the most productive route?
I have a question about the exercise that we did that's based on what you said right now about where we're positioned. And so when we were doing the exercise, so I also did yoga because I practice a lot of yoga, and I took it as like if someone were to start a yoga practice, those are the steps, not just like to start practicing yoga, that's what they do, like starting with roll out your mat, stand like in front of it with your like hips stacked on your legs stacked, kind of like the whole thing.
Yeah, that's exactly,
The way that I see it is that how to get yourself to do yoga is another problem. It's like kind of something else.
And this is what we talked about in the beginning. It's like, where is your beginning? Some people's beginnings are, how do I get myself to do this? Somebody else's beginning, well, we're here. How do you begin to move? How do you begin to act? For whatever series of positions, or whatever you're doing with yoga. You need to know where you've defined your starting point as, and it's really critical. Is this productive? Is it the most productive route? Your template should tell you, right? Are you moving through efficiently? It's a really simple question. What's the beginning? But the implications of doing this well are really very profound. Is this also effective for other people? You know, are you aware of the fact that, oh, well, I can do this, but I wouldn't start anybody else doing it this way. So my community members, I'm not starting, you know, like, if I was going to teach somebody how to make those 24 movements, you know, all I would have the first person do is roll the bar, you know, up to their shins. That's already a huge decision of how to begin. Right? What's the optimal vantage point? You're able to adjust and align yourself as things happen if you start with this mindset. We're really talking about a different mindset. You can pull the problem into its optimal dimensions. How many times have you worked on problems where you thought, we don't even know how big or small this thing should be? So your problem design allows you to think about what is the optimal dimension of the problem. It helps you avoid seductive tangents and useless planning and mission drift. Because what your beginning should be, what that terrain should look like, is the extreme criteria of the problem. Get the right things done. If I look at my list, am I getting the right things done? Act in a disciplined way. It helps you push back, you know, when you start to feel like you're taking on too much. Because you know what should be there already. You know, is this the most important thing that I should be doing right now? Right? Am I investing in the right activities, or are most of them trivial? You know, in sports, and in yoga, for example, I consider yoga a sport, of course, but you don't want to waste your energy, right? So trivial gets eliminated. In a beginner's list like this, you're working on definite yes. Yes, 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 yes. If there's a maybe, it's a no. Number 3, from mindset to momentum. In Olympic weightlifting, we have this thing called the 3-finger rule. And you might think that, oh, this is just not like being really strong. You grab the bar, and you hold on for dear life, and you pull it up, and then you just push it over your head. No. The idea is for the bar to be weightless. Now, how do I get the bar to be weightless? You know, it's all those steps in the right order. Give me the right trajectory. The bar's going to go up on its own. It's only going to be heavy for a couple seconds, right as I pull off the ground. And if I do everything else right, then it's going to fly up all by itself. You know, so I'm not having to push and strain and make things happen. This is the, you know, a principle of problem design is weightlessness, right? We should make things easier. I have to push on them and strain. It's the difference between using energy and force. And your ability to judge that difference. Right? So if I need to go slow and everything is about control and balance and equilibrium, or is it about speed and efficiency? Where in emergency circumstances, we're always talking about speed and efficiency. I mean, speed and, efficiency. If they come together just right, then we can do kind of miraculous things. Number 4, such a template like this, if you use it in your professional work and even in your personal, it puts you in relationship to what I call the REs, R-E, small s. The REs are redo, remake, rethink, rework, reimagine, repurpose, reuse, refit, replace, redesign, research, reassure. Where does that show up in your template? Am I going to be working, with the principle of reuse? How does that determine this beginning? So the Re's are very important allies because most of the time that's what you'll be doing. We don't innovate for no reason. We don't innovate just like that, just because we can. We don't need to. We need to know when to innovate. My little beginner's template helps us do that. Right. Number 5, insight into strategic trade-offs. We all have to give up stuff. But it shouldn't be like a pain in the neck to give things up. That's part of what we anticipate, what we know is going to come. So if I want a certain outcome, I'm not going to be able to get everything on my list. Where am I going to make that trade-off? In the safest place, in a place that's not going to cost me later on, in a place that's most effective and efficient?
So can you repeat the number 5 again? Insight to...
Yeah, into strategic trade-offs. So that it's disciplined and systematic, right? It's what I want the problem to do, how I want this problem to behave. And all of this allows you to know where you're really investing yourself. You can't invest yourself equally over all of the parts. Where do I need to use the most strength? Well, just to pick up the bar in the first few seconds. Then it doesn't weigh anything anymore if I follow my own beginner's list. Number 6, who are my partners? A friend of mine did write a beginner's list for Eggs Benedict. And then she realized, at minute 7, I need 2 people to help me. And here's what I need them to do. Typically, we have partners, and a lot of them. They shift. When do we need them? For how long? What are the responsibilities that we're assuming that they'll take on? Do I need experts? When? How long? Putting the right partners in place at the right time saves us a ton of money, right? It also allows us to understand whether or not we have the expertise to judge other people's expertise, which often isn't the case. We see it a lot in humanitarian aid. Very young people like yourselves working in very difficult conditions. What do you do if you need a water guy? You don't know a water guy. You call a colleague, but you don't necessarily know how to judge the expertise that you've been presented with. So these. Is it almost full? So what I'd like you to do at the end of this, so now you're starting to see, I hope you're starting to understand that working out this very detailed beginner's list, there are multiple useful insights that you now bring to the problem. You know a lot about the decisions that you're willing to make, that you're going to be engaging, and that you have confidence in. So I want you to do something. I want you to write a problem statement, 2 sentences, from your little exercise. If you didn't work on a professional piece, then we'll do it on the piece that you do. So what's your problem statement? Then I want you to hand it to the person next to you, and they're going to write a problem statement from what you wrote.
I just have a question. So, approaching about that a problem from the table. Like a lot of times, you understand how to start by failing. So, and I think it's pretty hard to kind of imagine the entirety of a scenario to see things change.
No, we're not talking about the end. Just the beginning. Just the beginning. We'll have to go pretty quick. So write a quick problem statement from what would the problem be? In problem first thinking, what we have is we have 4 key elements: problem acumen, craft, perspective, and impact. And it's a curriculum that we use. So what I'm giving you today is just this little template, this little idea of, wow, how critical are the games? So write a very quick problem statement, and then hand it to the person next to you, and let them write a problem statement from what you hand your beginner's list. And from that person's beginner's list, then you write a problem statement.
Statement being a summary of your list of tasks.
Yeah, well, what am I going to achieve? For example, a good problem statement is something like, we're going to keep 100 children in school all year in this school system with this much money by providing hot lunches over the year. So it's going to cost me this much money. I'm going to keep this many people in school. We're going to do it this way. That's a problem statement. That's really clear. It tells me how much it's going to cost, who am I serving, for how long, and what I expect is something about that. And we expect them to be able to stay in school. So just try to write a really quick little problem statement about what you would expect to get. And let the person next to you see what you wrote and try to write that same problem statement. Just try to write a problem statement from what you wrote. Because if you were handing it off to me, would I know what the problem is? Would I have the same experience of your beginner's list? Probably not. But But there's an enormous amount of waste and missed opportunities because our problems aren't very well defined. Talked a lot about why that is. But working with really simple tools, you don't need really complex tools. You know, as we move through the process with our clients, there's a lot of emphasis on language. You could get into this in detail, but just a simple tool like a beginner's list will tell you a tremendous amount. Does anybody want to read their problem statement? If you write the problem statement at the beginning, you get a whole different result because it won't have anything to do with what you actually intend. So you kind of can come to this contradiction. I have my problem statement, but I don't really know where the beginning is. And so.
I have one I know already, but it's probably too up here. I don't know enough about it. How do I get more NGOs to make use of climate science forecasts to inform the programming so as to reduce the vulnerability and exposure to climate risks and the impact of adverse events?
Okay. It's really huge. Yeah, really general. And it's not, it's a question.
Yeah.
No, statement. So, other people.
Well, I have something for him. Take good pictures.
Take good pictures. That's his problem statement.
That's his big problem.
Oh, that's his. You have yours?
Yes. Self-teaching painting simply with water. Self-teaching painting with watercolor and minimum equipment to devices anywhere at any time for cheapest way.
Okay. Yeah. Is it 4? Oh,
It's horrible.
yeah.
And it would like, it's expensive to have an instrument, so I think this is the first problem, and saxophone in special. It's not easy to find a musician to help you to take classes.
So the problem statement is how do I get the money for the I intend to get the money for the I intend to mow lawns for the entire summer so that I can have enough money to buy my saxophone by the end of the Yes, what are you trying to solve? Because at this point now that you've worked with these templates, you can start to think, well, what's the outcome? Where am I headed? There might be some contradictions, but it's not necessarily, not necessarily that there's only one potential solution. If you go back up and start following the problem that has to resolve with this list, you start to see where it is. So I'll let you go. Try to play with this, practice it a little bit. Use it, when the next time that something comes up, you think, what is the problem? Because it's really not, it's not okay that we come away saying, I'm looking on the right. It's not okay that we come away saying, oh, well, the solution wasn't the answer. Or that we're actually working on solutions that are not, where there is no problem.
really expensive.
To work on. So thank you very much.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Let's see, can I shut this off? Not quite sure how to get rid of that. Is there a way to turn it?
Interesting. I'm going to have to learn this system myself.
About that.